It's with great pleasure that I'm going to ask Thorkil Sonne to come up here, because he's a hero to the autism community, to all of the families, and he's a personal hero to me. So thank you.
Well, thanks for this fantastic introduction. Thanks for the opportunity to come here. Thanks for organizing all this. Being in the Botanical Garden, I would like to start with a plant that is pretty well known in Denmark. It's called the dandelion. Loved by kids. They make necklaces, they blow dandelions, they paint each other's in the faces with the dandelion. But when you grow older, your own norms are being replaced by society's norms. And if you buy a house with a garden and you see a dandelion, what do you see? Often the love turns to hate, because now it's a weed, because your lawn has to be just as perfect as the neighbor's, and only the flowers that you have decided are welcome in your garden. The plant is the same, but something has happened since you were young. There is a very smart farmer in Denmark who grows dandelions. He makes a living out of treating this plant as a herb that others see as a weed. He knows that from nature it's one of the most valuable plants. It can be used for nutrition, for natural medicine, coffee, tea, wine, beer. The plant is the same, but what is it? Is it a weed? Is it a herb? Well, a weed is a plant in an unwanted place. A herb is a plant in a wanted place. So we can all turn weeds into herbs by taking it from the lawn, put it in the kitchen garden. And the powerful message is that who decides if something is a weed or a herb? Every one of us. Every one of us can decide, will I take the herb angle or the weed angle? Now, when we talk about autism, in Denmark, if there's articles about autism in the papers, it's about how many new incidents of autism have occurred, how costly it is for society, how much pressure it puts on the special education system and the pension system in Denmark. That's very much the weed angle. There could be articles about how great it is that there are so many who seems to be at the edges of mainstream, of normality, because this is where a lot of the innovation will come from. This is the kind of people the corporate sector needs when everything can be copied cheaper somewhere in the world. The companies who will win in a knowledge-based market economy will be the ones who are best at managing the outliers, because that's where quality, that's where innovation comes from. My life changed 12 years ago when my youngest son was 3 years old. They reported from the kindergarten that he was different. It was hard for them to find out how to handle him. At home we haven't noticed, because where he was in his comfort zone, he was very much like his siblings. But in the kindergarten with 25 kids, high activity level, high noise level, not many quiet corners, not many swings in the gardens. This must have been like a war zone for this poor child. So we ended up with a psychologist, and we were told that he has autism. It's a lifelong disability, there's no cure. You have to change your lives. You have to face that now your role as parents have shifted, because he will not have the empathy skills. He will not be able to engage in teamwork. He is not that flexible. He cannot manage stress. He'll be easy to bully, and he will probably be rejected by a labor market who seek good team players, flexible employees who can promote their own ideas, manage their own time, manage stress. He cannot, but he's damn good at many other things. He has a fantastic memory, passion for detail, very structured mind, and he finds the pride in what he do instead of who he are amongst. Now we can see the herb in our child, but we try to raise this child in a society where they see the weed instead of the herb. And as a parent, all you want to do is to make sure that all of your children get a good life. So after we have kind of digested that now we're not a perfect family anymore, now we have a family member who has a disability, I joined the Autism organization and became chairman for a local branch of Autism Denmark for 3 years. And I learned about the Danish welfare system, which is very good. Especially when I go around the world, the more I go around, the more I actually appreciate the tools in the welfare system in Denmark. But it's meant for people who have visible disabilities. If you have invisible disabilities, you might be just as smart or smarter than the social workers who will think, pull yourself together. You seem to be intelligent enough. Why don't you go out and find a job? Well, they are really trapped. And that's probably the situation in most countries. We were in despair as parents, but we could see that nothing changed for Lars. Luckily, he was still the same caring, lovely, clever child. And that's actually what's most important for us. So when we have accepted that Lars is Lars, and we came to the idea that maybe it's not Lars that is the problem. Maybe it's our society that is the problem. So I quit my job as a technical director in an IT company in order to start up the first company in the world that sees autism as a competitive advantage. We want to train, assess, educate the skill sets of people with autism and go out and find the tasks that we can do better, not cheaper, but better. It has been quite challenging. The banks didn't share my enthusiasm about changing the world. And I couldn't find any funding to start up with, so I had to ask my wife to mortgage our house in order to get started. So suddenly it was not just an idea that I had to try. Suddenly it was the family economy at stake as well. And then you can get really persistent and find your ways when challenges occur. So I started Specialisterne, Danish for the specialists, in 2004. And after a few months, BBC World News came along and made a feature, and mails came pouring in from all over the world. So I found out that autism is not just a Danish phenomenon. It's an international phenomenon. I've been contacted by so many parents who have seen a hope for the first time for their kids. And I can assure you that the power of parents seeing a hope for the first time for their kids globally is stronger than nuclear power and whatever you can come up with. In Denmark, we have today about 20 people in the 5-month assessment and training program. And the purpose of that is to give these people a fair chance. They know a lot about what they're not good at and what is difficult. It's very well documented in the autism description. But what are their motivations? What's their dream? What are their skills? And what does it take for them to excel? It does not say so in the description of their disability. So that we have to find out. Many have been bullied and shouted at all their life. They have built shields around them, and we have to help them define their comfort zone so that we can peel off these shields and get to work with the personality. After the assessment training and the youth education that's 3 years old, those who are motivated and skilled and for whom we have an opportunity to bring into carry out tasks in the labor market, we employ as consultants. So we have in Denmark 35 consultants, and about 80% of them work at the customer sites, solving tasks like software testing, data entries, quality control, data cleansing, tasks that require this good memory, this pattern recognition skills, and many of these tasks have a repetitive character. And it can be hard for many employers to motivate their own staff to do this with the required quality. But we bring in joy of work. We bring in quality that is as good or better than they've seen before. We have our starting point in the IT sector because that's where I had my background. But I would like to bet with any of you in other areas that at least 5% of all tasks in any business area would suit just as well or better for our people. When we introduce a task, a work relationship with a customer, we introduce the special work relationship, like don't use irony, don't use sarcasm, because it can be hard for our people to find out. You say something, you mean the opposite. If you have this smile on your face, if you don't have the smile on your face, you may mean what you say. Now this can be quite challenging to figure out. We ask the customer to set the expectations clearly, to describe the task, to plan the task, to set up work environment that takes special sensory issues into consideration. So if it's in open office environment, we may need some dividers. If it's in noisy environments, we may need headset with neutral sounds. But that can be dealt with. The biggest commitment we ask for is do not stress our consultant. That's a big commitment because many stress their employees a lot. We get a lot of feedback from managers that they've learned a lot about good management, because good management is about setting expectations clearly, making sure that the employees are comfortable in the work setting and do not stress your employees. We call it the dandelion management model, and it's all about to focus on the skills, the personality, what it takes to define your own little flower bed. You may be in a lawn or in a hostile flower bed, but if you have your own little micro flower bed around you, you can thrive. These people that I represent, people on the autistic spectrum, and those who have similar challenges. There are so many people who have a normal or higher intelligence that are limited by our mental kind of perception of people who are different. We can bring them in by thinking herb instead of weed, thinking of what are the virtues and what does it take to make this little flower bed. We do not talk about integration, we talk about accommodation and inclusion. And if the corporate space is interested and willing to accept that you cannot just treat these people like anyone else, you have to follow our rules. That's the name of the game. then we can bring in lots of resources in the vacant jobs. In Europe, I was in a panel with the EU Commission on Employment and Social Affairs. He talked about the dilemma: 25 million unemployed, 4 million vacant jobs in science, technology, engineering, math. 700,000 of them was in the IT sector. I talked about people with autism and how they can contribute to the labor market, and about the latest figure says 1 in 88 qualify for an autism diagnosis. And then there are the people with ADHD, ADD. In the schools in the US, I think that maybe between 5 and 16% of the pupils are being diagnosed with a disorder called ADHD. Now, that tells me that maybe it's not the pupils that is the problem. Maybe there's something wrong with the school system. Because the consequence of putting labels on all these pupils, that they have a disorder, now that's a problem when they're going to apply for a job in a business world that likes order and are afraid of disorder. So I think the communities in Europe and the US have an urgent need to find a new way of looking at people who at the Harvard Business School called the outliers, those outside mainstream. We have to focus on them. Specialisterne in Denmark is a for-profit company. I sold it with 6 employees for 20 US cents after 5 years to a not-for-profit Specialist People Foundation, which is the platform for realizing our 1 million job goal. We will realize our goal by establishing Specialisterne replications as the showcases that can make it attractive for the stakeholders in local communities to see that it can actually happen. You can, by treating these people in a special way, turn disability into special abilities. And then we want the corporate sector to use our knowledge and do the same as we do. That's where we go from 1,000 to the million. That's where we mainstream employment of the people who are left out today. We are in 5 countries today, and we are in different stages of planning for about 10 new countries, from Singapore to Calgary. And in the US, we have a particular interest right now. We've been invited by the governor of Delaware to start up in Delaware. He chaired meetings, and it helps when the governor is sitting at the end of the table and discussing with local stakeholders how a local state can get most out of a concept like ours. This week I will be in 4 states. I've been to North Dakota, Minnesota, before Colorado. We are going to start up there as well. In these states, there's a severe shortage on skilled people. The corporate sector is suffering out on opportunities. Jobs are going to India or other places because they cannot fill the jobs in the local communities. While there are so many people who are unemployed, who can be brought into carrying out these tasks. Now, this has been kind of accepted in the states I mentioned. We're also in the planning phase in New York, and I personally will lead the startup in Delaware. And we have decided that we want to focus so much on North America now. We've set a goal of enabling 100,000 jobs in North America. That's a humble goal in my eyes. And in order to do that, I will relocate with my family to the US ground. I'll move to Delaware so that we can get the most out of our 8 years of experience when we start up here. I had a couple of days here in Colorado, and I'm really excited about the interest and the support from the stakeholders we met so far. I am a song and dance guy. I travel around the world. Luckily, there are people like Steve, like Betty, who says, we want this to happen in our local community. So they are the local song and dancers. But if we should have a rock concert, we need every one of you to take part in this. It's a win-win-win-win-win situation for all stakeholders. But it's like it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a community to go from hope into action and to go from action into impact. Our aim is to start up Specialisterne wherever there's enough support from the stakeholders and where we can find the money needed in order to cover the startup costs until break even. That's probably around $1.5 million. The ultimate goal is to go from building bridges, as we do with establishing Specialisterne, to remove the divide that is there today. And that's where we need all stakeholders to take the herb angle, forget the weed angle, and work with us, with Steve, with Betty, with myself, to establish Specialisterne here in Colorado. Thank you.